chapter 2, verse 25. Avyaktoyam achintoyam avikaryoyam uchyate tasmat evam vidhitayuna nanusochitam arhasi. Word by word meaning: Avyakta, invisible. I am this soul. Achinta, inconceivable. I am this soul. Avikarya, unchangeable. I am this soul. Achyate, is said. Tasmat, therefore. Evam, like this. Vidita, knowing it well. Enam, this soul. No, do not. Anusochitam, to lament. Arhasi, you deserve. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. Purport: as described previously, the magnitude of the soul is so small for our material calculation that he cannot be seen even by the most powerful microscope. Therefore, he is invisible. As far as the soul's existence is concerned, no one can establish his existence experimentally beyond the proof of Shruti or Vedic wisdom. We have to accept this truth because there is no other source of understanding the existence of the soul. Although it is a fact by perception, there are many things we have to accept solely on grounds of superior authority. No one can deny the existence of his father based on the authority of his mother. There is no source of understanding the identity of the father except that the authority of the mother. Similarly, there is no source of understanding the soul except by studying the Vedas. In other words, the soul is inconceivable by human experimental knowledge. The soul is consciousness and conscious. That also is the statement of the Vedas, and we have to accept that. Unlike the bodily changes, there is no change in the soul. As eternally changeable, the soul remains atomic in comparison to the infinite Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is infinite and the atomic soul is infinitesimal. Therefore, the infinitesimal soul, being unchangeable, can never become equal to the infinite soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The concept is repeated in the Vedas in different ways just to confirm the stability of the conception of the soul. Repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter thoroughly without error. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namo Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayham Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Sri Guru Sri Uttapadakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaita Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakha Pitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Visavanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpataru Vescha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Thank you so much for joining this weekday evening Bhagavad Gita discussion forum. And this again is such a powerful verse where Krishna, Param Punya Purushottam Krishna, is explaining about the properties or the characteristics of the soul. And when he's explaining to Arjuna in a gradual manner. 2 verses ago, when he started explaining about the soul, he explained that this soul can not be cut to pieces by any weapon, not burned by fire, nor moistened by water. So when he was explaining about the characteristics of the soul, Lord Krishna was giving the example of what can happen when it comes in contact with another material thing like weapon, fire, water. So in order to explain something, Lord Krishna, as he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is trying to make a thought process clear to Arjuna by giving the knowledge in a way which is understandable to Arjuna, and gradually he is becoming, in his explanation, he is becoming more and more complex in providing the nature of the soul, because soul, if you think about it, is not a very simple uh, thing in terms of understanding. With our material knowledge, with the understanding of this material things we are tuned with, like a house or a car, or like a gate. With this kind of a understanding, it is not easy to recognize what a soul is. That's why in 2.23, from ground up, he is giving an impression about the properties of the soul by giving an example about the weapon, fire, and water, as these things have no effect on the soul. Then gradually, Lord Krishna, and also he's saying the soul is not withered by wind as well. So he's giving the example of weapon, fire, water, wind has no effect on the soul, so that Arjuna could understand. And then in 2.24, then he's getting into more direct explanation. But let's try to understand what he is trying to say gradually. So in this verse, he is saying the soul is unbreakable, insoluble, can neither be burnt nor dry, is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. So in all this, 8 or 9 aspects of the soul he's explaining, he's always giving a negative impression. Not. Like whenever we want to talk about how a kartal is, if you want to explain what a kartal is, you say the kartal is not like mridanga. Kartal is not like a microphone. But that doesn't explain what a kartal is, right? And why is Krishna explaining the aspect of the soul in a very negative way as to what that is not? And that in Vedic philosophy is called as neti. Neti philosophy. Neti means na iti. That means because these points, these concepts are very unique, and it needs a very higher understanding to recognize the point. Generally, in all Vedic arguments, you'll find references to neti. That's the reason why in our earlier, when our sages used to go out in India, for example, when they know that the audience to them is not very potent and they are not very conscious, they would start with the 33 crore personalities who you can pray, because they're understanding that the audience is not up to mark to showcase the importance of the unalloyed devotional service. So because let them first go pray, offer their devotion to any of these 33 crore personalities. But gradually, when our rishis, they see that these people are advanced and they are able to understand and grasp, they try to put forth the idea of the demigods. And then when they feel that the audience is more advanced, then they think about the unalloyed devotional service, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and how to serve them. So as you can see, the same rishi, based on the characteristic of the audience, explained our Vedic philosophy in a very different way so that people grasp it. But that doesn't mean that we have this 33 crores and we should all focus on that, and so on. So this native and neti characteristic, how Krishna is opening up, just to give a background as to he's giving all, not this, not this, not that. It provides a ground for Arjuna to understand. And in the beginning, he's giving a more explanation around the weapon and cutting, fire and burning, water and moistening, and wind and withering. And then in 2.24, he's gradually going to a higher level. As I explained, from the 33 crores, our rishis used to go for, a reference to our demigods, and then they, go to, the Trinity, and then eventually go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Likewise, Krishna's gradual explanation of the property of soul is very interesting, actually. If you study closely, you recognize that Krishna is very clear, because Arjuna, when he kept the Gandhi and he started to hear from Krishna from 2.11 onwards, Krishna is sequencing his understanding for Arjuna in such a way that Arjuna is able to grasp. And then in 2.25, where we are right now, he is being slightly more direct. And the direct in 2.25, which you just heard, there were some audio challenges. Hope you're able to hear me properly. It's my mistake. So he is explaining, Lord Krishna is explaining, is going more direct. He's explaining about avyakta. That means is invisible. The soul is invisible. That means we cannot use our sense of sight. So Krishna is getting into the senses aspect of it. And what is that sense? It's one of the five senses. And Krishna is saying, soul is avyakta, is invisible. Then he's saying, the soul is achinta, inconceivable. So how do you conceive? We conceive things through our mind, right? When we think about something, we conceive some thought process, it's through mind. So from the five senses, one of the five senses being sense of sight, Krishna is coming to the subtle aspect, which is the mind. And then Krishna is talking about avikarya. That means soul is unchangeable, immutable. So when we think about the unchangeable and immutable aspect of the soul, we recognize our body changes 6 times during our life. In 13.6, Srila Prabhupada in his purport explains that our body goes through birth, 1, number 2 being growth, number 3 being stays, number 4 produces byproducts, 13.6 and 7, and number 5 begins to decay, and the 5th and the 6th is vanishes. So our body changes 6 times within the lifetime, as explained by His Divine Grace in 13.6 and 7. So there are 6 changes to the body, and there are different phases, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. But those 6 changes which we discussed, birth, growth, stays, produces byproducts, begins to decay, and vanishes, are the changing form of the body. But here Krishna is saying soul doesn't change. So that is very clear to us that we are not the body, we are the soul. And if we have recognized this, our spiritual understanding will be clear. And that is why Srila Prabhupada is very critical about why people in this age are so much worried about their body in terms of what they eat, how we look. So whenever we think about, somebody is trying to compliment, Prabhu, you're looking very good. And at that time, actually, when the person says, Prabhu, you're looking very good today, that means today he's actually praising the dress you're wearing, not you. Because if you're supposed to look good, you look good all the time, not today. So that's where some of our acharyas mentions that when this kind of thing comes and we feel puffed up, or we have that element of ahankara, that is when we should recognize that the person who is trying to comment on our appearance, he's actually commenting on the external appearance. Probably the dress he's wearing is good. And that is where we have to kind of insulate ourselves from the understanding that this body, which is so temporary, changes so many times. And Krishna here so nicely is explaining that we are conscious. And Prabhupada explaining the conscious and consciousness are no different in purport, which we just studied. So there, as our consciousness is very much different. Consciousness is attributed to our soul. When the soul leaves our body, we are not conscious. So the consciousness and the conscious, when we are conscious, we have the consciousness in our body, and when it travels out, when it transmigrates, we are basically, we do not have the conscious lifestyle. So the soul, which is part and parcel of Krishna, has these properties, these 3 properties, where Krishna is gradually coming from being very, very direct with weapon and cutting and water and wetting the thing to more objectification aspect, soluble, everlasting. Then in 2.26, he is going to more subtleness, where seeing and conceiving through the mind, which is a subtle aspect of our body. Mind, intelligence, false ego is a subtle aspect, and there he's talking about inconceivable aspect of it. And then Krishna is explaining about it doesn't change at all, and that is where Krishna is distinguishing about between the body and and the soul. And then Prabhupada in the translation explains that knowing that this is invisible, inconceivable, and it doesn't change, and the body changes 6 times in this example, you should not grieve for the body. So Arjuna, or in that example where somebody is trying to praise us about our appearance, actually the person is giving that kind of a feeling where he's praising the dress you're looking, and knowing this, Krishna is saying you should not grieve for the body, because in this age we spent a lot of time taking care of our body, taking care of our physical aspect of it, and we never try to nurture our soul, and that is why we have such challenges. And the second thing Prabhupada explains about denying the existence of his father. No one can deny the existence of his father based on the authority of the mother. So here, what happens is in these kind of topics on the soul are very seldom analyzed. It is only comes from the stuti, or comes from the authorities. And that is where we have 3 kinds of praman, and here we have to recognize that we have to follow the sabda praman when it is coming from the authority. We have, pratyaksha praman. Pratyaksha praman is something what you see, but there is a proof that you see, but sometimes what you see is not what it is. Like the pencil in a glass of water, it appears bent, and the pratyaksha aspect of it says it is bent, but actually the pencil is straight. So pratyaksha praman has fallacy around it. Then the anuman praman, the classic example is 6 blind people going around an elephant. They have never seen an elephant, and they're thinking, the person around the ear thinks it's a fan, the person around the leg thinking it's a pillar, and he's saying no, it's not a fan, it's a pillar, and the person around the tail thinks it's a snake. So the anuman praman is also has faultiness. So the anuman praman and pratyaksha praman have faultiness. The only praman which is valid is sabda praman. Sabda praman means it has to come from the authority, and that is where Prabhupada is saying, in order to deny, no one can deny the existence of the father based on the authority of the mother. So mother's sabda, mother is the authority in determining who the father is. So the sabda praman is critical in understanding. If our supreme authorities have explained the soul is so and so, we have to recognize it, because if we go to ask for pratyaksha praman, if you go around and people, when you sell a book, trying to distribute a book, people will ask you, who told you, have you seen a soul, have you seen a soul that it is one by, you cut the tip of the hair 100 times, and then you cut that 100 times into another 100 times, that is 1 by 1 10,000, 100 and 100, that is the size of the whole. Have you seen it? And you will be subjected to these kind of questions, and that is where you need to invoke, we all need to invoke the sabda praman aspect of it, because pratyaksha praman is faulty, and anuman praman is faulty. So as we discuss all these things, there's one pastime which comes to my mind, which I think will probably, with that, will probably end the discussion. So once, Bharat Maharaj, when he was in the Vanaprastha and the later part of his life, he was in the jungle as a hermit. He saw this, the mother deer, just who was pregnant, was jumping into the river because he got scared of a carnivorous animal trying to attack. And in that unique situation, she gave birth to a small deer, and she passed away. And Bharat Maharaj saw it. And when Bharat Maharaj saw it, and the mother died, he took the smaller newborn deer and took care of the small deer. And in due course, he got so much attached to the deer that he started, neglecting his prescribed duties of meditation and whatever he was doing at that time. And that really got him focused away from his principles. And sometimes he would take care of the deer in such a way that he got totally attached to the deer. And when once the deer left, and he was going around, he was trying to look for a deer in so many different places, but he was seeing deer, impression of deer on the moon, or different places. So he was constantly attached. And when the deer left, and with the separation, with the remembrance of the deer, his end came. And in the next life, he actually became a deer, because he has got so much of attachment to that little deer who he was taking care. So in the subsequent life, he became a deer. And he remembered all his past, and he was a very good deer in his subsequent birth. And in this next life, he was born into a Brahmin family. So you have the King Bharat, who was in hermitage and got hold of a mother deer who passed away, giving birth to a small deer, and he couldn't. With compassion, he started bringing him up, and then getting attached to it. And the next birth, because he left his body with the feelings and thinking about the deer, he born as a deer. In the third life, in this example, he became a person where he was very bright. He was born to a Brahmin family, but as he has full understanding of his prior two lives in this example, he was not really speaking. People thought he cannot speak, but actually he pretended as if he cannot speak. And with that, in his Brahminical family, he had got so many brothers and sister-in-laws. They used to take care. They used to give the remnants, and he used to nicely eat. And he was pretending as if he can't speak, but he had all the knowledge of the past. And then he was once he was going somewhere, and there is one or two pastimes which we'll skip, and finally he was picked to carry the palkin of a king who was really passing at the time, because some of the palkin carriers got injured, and the king who was passing, his name is Rahugana, and Rahugana was carrying. And when he used to carry the palkin, Bharat Maharaj, so in the third life, whenever he used to see little ants below, he used to try not to kill the ant, because he understood the concept of soul and body very well, and he used to kind of not step on the ant. And with that, the king who was in the palkin, Rahugana, he got a jerk, and he was having a bumpy ride, and then he got kind of angry, and he said, what happened? You look like a nice boy. You're pretty healthy. What is happening? He didn't say anything. And then after subsequent rides, it became more bumpy, because he wanted to prevent the killing of some ants under the foot. So then Rahugan became very angry. He came out, and he fired up and said, if you do like this, I'm going to punish you, and I'm going to make sure that you are treated in the prison, and eventually, if I'm not satisfied, I might kill you. I'll give you that punishment. And then Bharat Maharaj at that Bharatji, who is actually pretending to be Jada Bharat at the time, he opened up his mouth and he explained that you can not kill myself because I'm not the body, I'm the soul. And then this king, who was pretty conscious, he recognized that how come this person who was appearing like a palkin carrier is so bright? He understands the inner workings of the spiritual existence, and then there is an interaction between Rahugan and Jadabharat, for quite some time, and then he explains the nature of this creation in terms of we are not the body, we are the soul. As long as our prescribed duties are not properly done, we land into different issues in our life. So a couple of things to learn from here is how you nurture your soul. Eventually, as you end your life, it transmigrates in a similar way like Bharatji in his first birth, in separation from the deer, he left his body and then became a deer. And then, because he was so conscious, he could remember prior lives in this. So this is a very interesting topic, that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and unchangeable, but it becomes a very important aspect of our future life. And once we recognize it, once we lead our life in the prescribed way, nurturing the soul, taking care of the soul, which Krishna is explaining here, so nicely. And then, if we think that this is the soul which is, undergoing all the things, we will never grieve for the body. And it's very easy to say that, but in Krishna consciousness, if we think that everything is a remnant from the Supreme, everything is a prasad, if we take it like that, the happiness or sadness in our life, and we recognize that we are not the body, we're the soul, and the sadness what we are undergoing, matra sparsi tukanteya, no sukha dukkha, that means the sadness and happiness is like Sitosno Sukha Dukha. It's like the winter and summer season, and it is a blessing. The sadness is a blessing, and they are taking these credits away from my loan, and we lead a very blissful life, and we will never grieve for these little trials and tribulations. So very inspiring text, and that's why they say, Krishna says always never lament and never cry. They say our past is a life lesson, not a life sentence. Life sentence means, you understand what the life sentence is. It's punishment, right? So the past is a life lesson, and it's not a life sentence. So with that, I would like to open up for any questions. I kind of overshot by 3 minutes. Didn't want to, but thank you for for giving me a listen. And Srila Prabhupada ki jai.